Welcome to another episode of This Woman Works. I am your host, Mike Patton, and on this episode, we're going to get to know Miss Aishia Deal. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Thank you again for coming on the show. We're going to get to know you and your journey on this episode of This Woman Works. But before, of course, we get into your journey, we do have to do the Black Girl Magic moment. And for this episode, it is Miss Shonda Rhimes. Now, I know plenty of people know that name, but we're going to give you a little background on Shonda Rhimes. Now, Shonda Rhimes was born in Chicago, Illinois, which I did not know that before looking up that information. Of course, both parents worked at universities, actually. One was a teacher, college professor at a university in the Chicago area, and her dad actually ended up being the chief info officer at USC, and it was that until 2013. Of course, she grew up with two older brothers and three older sisters with an affinity for storytelling, and she actually liked hospital areas that'll come in handy in a minute. She went to Marian Catholic High School, then went to Dartmouth, where she actually majored in film and English and graduated in 1991. Then she would move to San Francisco, where one of her older brothers were. And of course, from there, we moved to Los Angeles. She got a couple of little bits of different things to do with Hank Aaron, like a documentary or something of that nature. And then also the Princess Diaries, too. She actually was a writer on that. But where she got her biggest break, Grey's Anatomy 2005. It was actually a mid-season replacement. It wasn't actually a show that was actually set to actually be a for real show that's lasted as long as it has.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a mid-season replacement that in 2005 that is still around 20 plus years later. Um, from that, she had a spinoff, which is Private Practice. That started in 2007. Of course, you can't forget Scandal, 2011. Then 2014, How to Get Away with Murder. Then, of course, you flip over to Netflix, Bridgerton. She was the person behind Bridgerton.
I know that.
And she also was the person behind the spinoff, which is Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. So
Mm.
Shonda Rhimes has been running television for 20 years, y'all. 20 years. Nothing but respect for Shonda Rhimes, the creative genius that she is. She is the Black Girl Magic moment on this episode. Now,
That's
Aisha,
real
did you
magic.
exactly? Do you have anything else you wanted to add in terms of that? Because I know Shonda Rhimes had everybody in a chokehold for a
I
while.
mean, she had me in a real chokehold. I did not know about Bridgerton. I never watched her spinoff show from that, but
Mhm.
she definitely had me in a chokehold from the moment the Scandal, Grey's Anatomy. I mean, I think she got me with Grey's Anatomy. But I mean from there, yeah, I'm all things Shonda Rhimes for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It amazed me that she is just, I didn't know she was from Chicago. Like I mentioned that, but wow, I didn't know she went to Dartmouth either. I was like, okay,
No,
okay.
the fact that just to even say that she just got a moment. I mean, that just does show like when Eminem said that, sometimes you only get one shot. Don't miss your chance. I mean, like she had that little moment to just that little break where she had an opportunity and with Grey's Anatomy and she was able to get in there, you know what I mean? Or just like that writing opportunity with the Princess Diaries. It's like sometimes you just need that one opening and you can just kick the door down. You know what I mean? So like if that's not just a testament of what you can do when someone gives you an opportunity, I don't know what is. So I mean, she's the epitome of Black girl magic.
There we go. There we have it, Miss Shonda Rhimes. But we want to talk about another woman who has is basically is embodies black girl magic. That would be you,
Thank you.
Aisha Deal.
Thank
But of course, we can't get to know you now unless we get to know you and where you came from. So
you.
we're gonna start off getting to know young Aisha. Now, quick
Mhm.
question: where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I'm from the Ninth Ward of New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
So I spent the first half of my life in New Orleans, and then I spent the second half of my life in Altadena, California. So, I mean,
Oh, nice,
having
nice. So, go ahead.
I mean, it's so funny when you say that because it took me a moment because someone just recently said the other day, like, I don't know one person that just had like two of their cities wiped away by tragedy. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, one city, New Orleans, and then Altadena. So that's kind of like half and half. So my life was spent in both places, and I started there, and then when I was 18, I got a shot to intern in the rap department at Interscope Records. I met a guy at a restaurant in the Valley here in Los Angeles, and we were just talking, and I was like, yeah, so just the typical California, LA. So what do you do? And he was like, I was like, so what do you do? And he was like, oh, I work in the rap department at Interscope Records. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And he was like, oh yeah, well, you should come up to see, you should come up to the office one day. And I was like, okay, I'll come up there. And so I remember going up to the office, and it was loud. It was there was so much energy. And I remember just being like, wow, this is cool. I was like 19, I think, at the time. And I remember just being like, wow, this is cool. Like, I want to work up here one day. And I want to say, like, maybe the next week, they kind of offered me an internship just like on the fly. But I don't think that they expected me to last. Actually, they did everything so I wouldn't last, to be honest with you. They made it hard for
Oh,
me to last. And so I think some of them thought that I would just kind of be there to just be in the moment, maybe just to be around rappers, 50 Cent, Dr. Dre, Eminem. I mean, G Unit. I mean, at the time, everybody was signed to Shady Aftermath, G Unit. Um, and I think they just kind of thought I would just be there for the moment, maybe to meet rappers, maybe just to be at all the parties. And so I just had to show them and prove them. I mean, some of the executives didn't even speak to me. And I had to
hmm.
make sure that some of the guys probably thought they were going to have sex with me, and so I just had to make sure that I was the first one. I was the only girl. There was no other girls there. It was just me and all these guys, some of the biggest producers in hip hop coming in there, the biggest rappers. And I just remember I had to make sure that I outworked everybody. And by saying that, I had to come in early. Nobody told me I had to, but I had to show them that I wasn't, I had to work harder to be recognized and be respected. So I had to come in super early. I had to be the first one there, and I had to be the last one to leave. And I remember they didn't invite me to meetings. And the whole office would go into meetings, with the artists, and listen, Swiss Beats would come in, Dr. Dre would come in, they would be playing Snoop and stuff would come in, Suge Knight would come in, Rakim would come in, 50 Cent, everything, they would all come in. And I would never be invited to the meetings. And so, because no one took
Wow.
me serious. And then one
Huh.
day, my boss was like, after not speaking to me for like 9 months, called me into his office and was like, I watched you come in every day early and leave late. And he was like, I have a lot of respect for you. Like, I didn't think that you would make it. So purposely, he was purposely ignoring me. He was purposely pretty much hazing me because he wanted to see if I would last. And I
Hmm.
did. So from there started
Okay.
my career in the hip hop industry. And so from there I worked at
Mm.
Interscope, and then I went from Interscope to Warner Brother Records, in the R&B hip hop department. And from there I went to Vibe magazine. And I just started my career in the music industry.
Okay. All right. Yeah, definitely going to get more into, talking about the music industry and that journey. But I got to ask, growing up in New Orleans, how was it growing up in New Orleans? Said the Ninth Ward?
I grew up in the Ninth Ward in front of the Desire projects back in the day. It was
Okay.
interesting. It was interesting because um, we were kind of sheltered, but not sheltered, but also at the same time because the projects were right behind my grandparents' house, and that's where we were raised. So it's like the Desire projects were right behind the gate. So there's a fence, and then the projects were right behind it. And the boys used to throw rocks at us and cuss at us and throw us names, or we'd be walking to the store and they would be trying to fight us and stuff. And my grandmother would be like, nope, go to the store, get what I need, or we would want to go swimming in the pool. My grandmother wouldn't let us. So like we were kind of sheltered but in it, all around us, but kind of sheltered. But like it's home to me. Like I love New Orleans. Like even when we left to come here, I spent every summer going to New Orleans. Like every summer that I was out of school, back to New Orleans. So it was school year here, and then my summer there every single summer until I became old enough to then buy my own plane ticket. And then I started just going back on my own. And then when I became an adult, Thanksgivings, Christmas, just taking a break, going home to New Orleans. So I've always just been back and forth. And now that I have
Okay.
kids, my kids are back and forth. But New Orleans is it's something I can't even describe. It's a home, it's a safe place.
Okay. All right. Now I know as kids we always have our imaginations. They're very, very active. I know with me as a kid, I wanted to be a football player. I didn't quite make it there. I made it to college, but didn't quite make it to
Mhm.
the NFL. So, what was one of the first things you wanted to be when you grew up? Sitting there in New Orleans, grew up in the Ninth Ward.
A lawyer.
Okay.
I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know. I always had this thing for wanting to defend people. I don't know
Hmm.
why. I don't even know where that came from. But I always wanted to be a lawyer. I always wanted to like I just always felt like I was really good at arguing my point and just like always wanted to defend people. It's really weird, but I still kind of low key, high key have that about me. But I always wanted to be a lawyer. And then if being a lawyer didn't work out, I really have good comedic timing in real life. Like in my personal life, I have good comedic timing. So then the other half of me, the other half of my personality is a comedian. And so like if I wasn't a lawyer, then I wanted to be a comedian.
Okay.
I know
All
they're
right.
very
All right.
different. They don't go together. But if you know my personality, they really go together.
Okay. All right. So, a little comedy, a little serious.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, you did talk about a little bit about your journey. I kind of want to kind of transition to that and talk about you mentioned interscope and just the tough environment that was there. We're gonna get into that, but I just want to kind of for those that aren't aware, can you kind of tell everyone what all that you do as well?
Well, I guess number one, I'm a domestic violence counselor. So first and foremost,
Hmm.
I'm a trained and certified domestic violence counselor. But then the other side of my life, I am a radio personality, and so the sub part of that is I do relationships. So I do relationship segments in different markets around the country, as well as hot topics. And so radio personality. So basically my passion for radio and the music industry, because that's what I did. I got songs played on the radio, which was called, is a called mix show. So I got songs played on the radio. And so that kind of, opened the door for radio relationships and things like that. And people always told me I had a voice for radio. And so I just kind of like just love to talk to people and just naturally helping people, going back to my desire for being a lawyer. And I just always felt like I've always been like the voice for my friends growing up in relationships and compassion and listening and just kind of understanding both sides of men and women and relationship dynamics. And so it just kind of naturally led me down the road to doing relationships. And so I do relationships at radio. So I'm a domestic violence counselor. So that's one side of my life. And I have a nonprofit, A Space for Grace, and
Hmm.
I teach healthy versus unhealthy relationships to middle school and high school students as well. And then I do radio.
Ah, wow. A woman of many talents, for
Yeah.
sure, and of many interests.
Yeah.
Um, Now, of course, you mentioned radio and kind of bringing all of your talents through radio as well. Now, when did you start kind of gain interest in wanting to do like some more radio things, and of course with domestic violence counselor and things like that, and kind of bringing those all to I guess one place or one area in terms of radio?
I think they happen differently. The radio thing happened first because radio kind of fell into my lap. It wasn't like nothing that was on my radar. Actually, radio happened because of social media. It was one of those things where through being on social media, at the time it was Twitter, and just me just using just Twitter, and just this is back in like '09, having a Twitter account and just tweeting and talking about relationships, and just gaining a following, and the following getting bigger and bigger, and people just kind of starting to follow, and a lot of big names starting to follow. People just started saying like, you should write a book, or you should do this and you should do that. And then at some point, I was someone that I knew was at a radio station and like in a major market, and was like, there's somebody I want you to meet. And then it happened to be the operations director at that radio station. And then that kind of kicked off. Once I ended up in one major market, then that just kind of the other markets kind of started to reach out. So that's how radio started. And that came from social media, really. Domestic violence and doing the nonprofit stuff started because my mother has a domestic violence nonprofit. And so working with her, I would help her with her events, because working in radio and doing events and going to events, I just knew how to put them together. So I started helping my mom do her events, and just kind of just naturally being around women and domestic violence and helping my mom at her nonprofit. I just kind of grew a passion for helping women, hence my passion for just helping people. It came together, and just, wanting to work with women. So then I, started working with the state of California legislation and things like that. And then I became certified in domestic violence. It came together. And then the domestic violence, radio, relationships, all married. And it just all just came together like that.
Okay. All right. So can you tell us just about your first time you actually were given advice and actually on radio, and kind of how what that feeling brought about for you?
I know it was so weird. I want to say it was 2018. I was in Dallas, and I was doing like a radio run, and I was kind of going to the different markets that I'm in. Like I was going to Atlanta, I was going to Dallas, I was going to North Carolina, South Carolina. And I remember being in Dallas, and I remember hearing myself on the radio because I had just recorded it. Like I was in the studio, and it was kind of like a pre-record, like where I did it. And then shortly after I left, it ran. And I remember being in the car with my operations manager and it coming on the radio. And that was my first time ever hearing myself on the radio. And it was just like, oh my God. I remember I recorded it and listened to it. I was like, oh my God, I'm on the radio. It was like one of those like real life, like I'm on the radio type of moments. And I don't know, it was just a cool feeling. And now it's still just kind of dope because it's years later, and my followers and stuff will still in different markets will still send me audio, or they'll just record it and send it to my DM like, oh my God, you just gave such good advice today on the radio. Or like they'll at me, listening to my girl at Aishia Deal, giving some advice today, dropping gems. So it's like, it's just, I don't think you ever get used to hearing yourself on the radio, but I like the fact that people still love the things that I have to say.
Okay. All right. And what can you say was just the I'm where I'm supposed to be moment for you?
I don't know if I'm there yet. I mean, I feel like I'm getting there, but I don't know if I'm there yet, if I'm where I'm supposed to be. Um, I don't know if I'm where I am supposed to be yet, because I don't know if I reached the top to where I want to be yet. I don't know yet. Um, but I feel like I'm on the way. I feel like I've made a lot of stride. And just the phone calls that I get right now. Um, I love the fact that a lot of people are loving what I do. I like the fact that a lot of doors are opening and a lot more markets. Um, I feel like in radio, you're always constantly, and there's always the possibility that something can open and you have to move to a market. You know what I mean? Or something can open up full time and I have to maybe go to DC, maybe move to Charlotte. Like, I don't necessarily know if you ever land someplace because something bigger could open up someplace else. You know what I mean? But I feel like I am doing what I'm meant to be doing, if that makes any sense. I feel like I am
Mhm.
where I'm supposed to be, in a sense that I feel like I'm fulfilling what I'm meant to do. And that's helping people understand, bridging gaps, helping men and women communicate better, helping people heal. So in that sense, I think that I'm fulfilling that purpose. But when I get to where I'm supposed to be, I don't know where that's going to be just yet, but I think there's a little bit of excitement in that kind of sort of. But radio, you can go on forever. I mean, so you know what I mean? Like there's no age
Okay.
gap of when you have to stop.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
I understand. I understand. So, you mentioned about being on air and giving advice and things like that. But, um, of course, with any journey, there's always going to be some advice that you receive and give, and also there's going to be some hurdles. So, what was one of the biggest hurdles when you kind of made the move to giving more advice and being on social media giving advice and now radio giving advice? What was one of the biggest hurdles that you experienced during that journey?
I think one of the biggest hurdles that I that I go through even to this day is I think when you're the person that gives the advice and you're the person that people come to for advice, or just like you're just known for being the relationship
Mhm.
advice giver or just the life advice giver, that people often think that maybe you don't have hurdles, or that maybe you don't need somebody to talk to sometimes, or that that maybe you couldn't that you don't need an ear sometimes. So I think it's like that saying where they say like check on your strong friends. I think sometimes people forget that the advice giver can also, be that is that's viewed as the strong friend, can also use advice sometimes or checking on sometime. I think since I've been in this position, people don't see me that maybe sometimes I could use advice, or, I can use a shoulder sometime. I think the bigger the platform got, I think sometimes the smaller my circle has gotten as far as where I could go. I think that's the biggest
Mhm.
hurdle that I still struggle to overcome, is like my circle of where I can go has gotten smaller. Not because of anything other than people just don't see me as the person that needs anybody.
Okay. Now, during your career, during your journey, now, of course, you mentioned being an intern, being at Interscope, and all those different things. Just all the way to your journey now. What is some of the best advice you've received along that journey?
Um, I think some of the best advice that I received is a lot of times, well, number one is don't date the talent. That's really good advice. I'm so happy that I came in the door with that. I'm so happy because if I went in there, like just with like, goo goo gaga and just like easily impressed, then I would have been dating every rapper, producer, you know what I mean? So because I always maintain just a business mindset, um, I'm so well respected. So that's number one. Um, Number two is not to take a lot of things personally. And number three is that even though the music industry, the lines are blurred, because in the corporate world, you have on corporate clothes, you may have on a blazer, a tie, and people may act corporate. In the music industry, you may have on hats, and you know what I mean, you may have on jewelry, or your clothes may look different. You may be more casual, but you may be drinking alcohol and things like that. But it's more relaxed, but they're still just your coworkers. They're still just your associates. Like, it's a laxed environment, but everybody's not your friend. And if you get too comfortable, you could think that everyone's your friend. And it's no different than working in a corporate environment. Like, John is just your coworker, and then you go home. Well, in this world, you guys may party together. You may even go on trips together. You go to award shows together. But at the end of the day, these people are not your friends. They're your associates and they're your coworkers, and they don't owe you anything. Your friends are the people that you grew up with. Your friends are your longtime friends. The people that you may meet one or two or three close friends in it, but for the most part, your friends are the people that knew you before it. Most people that are in it are not your friends. And if you don't understand that early on, you're going to be angry, bitter, and you're going to have a lot of hurt feelings. So they're your coworkers, your associates, but they're not your friends. And I think that the earlier you realize that, the better off you'll be, and you won't be so jaded.
There we go. There we go. Now, of course, do you have any advice that anyone that's following in your footsteps would potentially do outside of what you currently mentioned, or that you should would mention to someone that wants to get in this industry or in radio or just in music in general, outside of what you just mentioned?
Um, I would say, just like I said, you'd have to it's a different world now going into it in 2025 than it was back when I got into it. It was much more friendly. It was much more open. I think now it looked more like me.
Mhm.
um, it's not so much like that today, and it's a lot more cutthroat, I would say, and everyone is way more out for self. Where back then people looked out for each other a little bit more, and that's not the case. And so you have to go into it just understanding what your goal is, and you have to utilize the tools that you have, and whether that social media, you can't be afraid to ask for what you want. You can't be timid. You have to stay on top of people. You have to stay focused on what it is that you want, and just remember again that everyone that say that they have your back don't necessarily always have your best interest at heart, but that's okay. You have to have an outside support system, and you have to understand also too that just because one person says no doesn't mean another person won't say yes, and that someone saying no is just it's all a part of the game and it's nothing personal. That everything that you're trying to do, there's about 100 people that are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, it's just the name of the game. There's 100 people trying to take the same spot you have, and there's only a limited amount of spots. So, one closed door doesn't mean that you can't get walk through another door.
That's true. That's true. And I did have one other question. In being in the music industry, and then coming over now to do radio, what was one of the more interesting stories that you had happen in terms of the industry as a whole?
Which kind of stories?
Yeah, no, a lot to
I
no,
mean,
just meaning like something that's just like, wow, I did not expect this to happen, or or maybe one that kind of correlates with the switch to radio or anything of that nature, perhaps.
I think just in general, I think just maybe not necessarily just to switch to radio, but just in general. I was talking to a friend of mine today, and we were talking about the end of like the BET Awards and them saying it was over. And I
Mhm.
knew it was over. I would say when they were inviting everybody to come out, and it was a big deal, and they were, flying people out and telling everybody to come. And it was like this big deal, and they weren't saying why they wanted everyone to come out, and they were paying people to be here and paying people from labels and radio stations to come to the award. And it was like, this whole big to do. And so I got word that it was because it was going to be the last BET Awards. But they had made the announcement that it was the last BET Awards. And so I was telling someone today that it's just the end of an era. And it's just the times that we're in. And even with radio is not the same like it was back then. Back then, it was all about spins and sound scans, right? Like sound scan used to be how many times a radio station played your record. And every week, the sound scan would come out, and we would look and see how many times each radio station hit your song, how many times they spent your record. And now it's all about streams, So we kept track, and we knew how many times, Dallas played your
Mhm.
record, how many times Houston played your record, how many times Atlanta played your record. Now it's all about how many times Spotify, how many times you're getting streamed on Spotify, how many times you're getting streamed on Apple Music, how many times it's like it's different. When Drake and Kendrick Lamar was beefing and Drake wasn't making any music, it really had a big impact on radio. Radio was losing their mind because so many radio stations were in clubs were eating off of Drake because Drake made the music that the radio stations played. And when radio stations played music, Drake's music, the clubs played Drake music. And so when Drake wasn't playing music, radio stations, the listenerships was low. I mean, I love Kendrick Lamar. I live here in LA. But the spins were low. The sound scam, so I understand that the streams were low. The clubs, the DJs were complaining because they had no club bangers to play. Like, I mean, it was the radio, the record labels were complaining because album sales were low. Streaming, I mean, it was behind the scenes, it was a hot mess because this one artist didn't have any hits because while all this beef was going on, he couldn't go in the studio and make any hits. And so this one artist trickled down, and you realize that how many people eat off of his music, whether people like it or not, in the masses behind the scenes, so many people eat off of his music, from the top to the bottom. And so there was just this whole hysteria that was going on. And so from radio to the clubs to the record labels, so many people eat off of this. And so radio right now is just, it's changing, and they're just trying to figure out, in a world where people want to plug up their phones and program their own music and stream their own music. Radio's trying to figure out, what do we do to bring listeners back to radio and not play their own Spotify playlist, their own title playlist. And they're just trying to figure out, what do we do to make music relevant again? And so times are just different right now. They're just changing right now. But I mean, that's just where we are. Award shows aren't relevant anymore. Radio is trying to figure out how to be relevant. Times are just changing. Video music award shows aren't as relevant anymore. And I think that the music industry in general is just going through a shift and just trying to figure out, how do we compete or stay relevant in a culture that is ever changing, or just wants songs to put on TikTok, or just wants a clip of music to do a quick viral video to. They're just trying to figure out how to keep up with ever changing times, and just accept the fact that there's some things that are just going to be washed away with the times, and just how to catch up. That's just where we are.
Yeah, it's definitely a changing time indeed. I want to thank you, Miss Aishia Deal, for coming on the show. If you can, tell everyone where they can find you on any on
Absolutely.
social media, or what all things you have working
Yeah,
right
I
now.
am I am at Aishia Deal on Instagram and Threads. And right now, that's where you can find me. Until I come back out with my podcast, I'll let you know. I'll put it on my Instagram page when I bring my podcast back. I'm on hiatus right now, but when I bring it back, I'll put it on my Instagram page.
Cool, cool. Well, of course, I'm the host of the show, Mike Patton. You can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Mike Patton 82. That's MikePatton 82. I won't call it X, because the only X I recognize is DMX and Malcolm X. That's it. But you can also find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Of course, this one works. You can find on the Mike Patton Network on YouTube. You can also find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of This Woman Works. We're out. Peace.